Doing.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that we're here getting to spend some time unpacking an excellent film that you can stream in your own living room. Lucky you, called Lavender Men. I'm very spoiled to be here. I'm Andy Monroe, use they, them pronouns. Uh, Introduce yourselves. I can't tell who's next in line because I can't see counterclockwise on the screen.
Roger, how about we introduce each other?
Okay.
Per-
I'm really excited to introduce Lovell Holder. And Lovell is the director of Lavender Men.
Ooh.
and I am thrilled to introduce Roger Q. Mason, who is the writer of the original play on which our film is based, and now the screenplay, and also stars in the film, in addition to producing it alongside me and our wonderful producers, Mia Chang and Mia Ellis. And we've known each other 20 years.
That's
We've known
fantastic. I was going to say we have to dig into that one. We might have to open with that. And of course, we're here with the Out on Film Festival, 37th year, heading looking so good in early middle age here with the Out on Film Festival. Y'all have known each
I
other.
like that. Yes, 37. 37 is good. 37's looking good. I,
It's
I think
looking
Roger and I will
good.
both cling to that one.
I don't know don't ask me what my skincare routine is. It's just optimism and lotion, honey.
Optimism is expensive in
Okay.
times such as these. That's
Absolutely.
quite a good product.
Mhm.
I want to hear from the two of you now. This is very rare. This is like a little bit of a fairy tale. Y'all have known each other since you were teens. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
I want to
late.
hear how you all met.
So I shall I leap in, Roger?
That's why I'm shutting up. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, no, I vividly remember it was my freshman year of college at Princeton, and I had gone to see a production of Romeo and Juliet, and there was this brilliant performer playing the nurse, and after that, I was like, who's playing the nurse? I've never seen them before. They're so phenomenal. And someone's like, oh, that's Roger. How do you not know Roger? And we connected after the performance, and then everything kind of took off from there. But I do always say, once you meet Roger, you never forget Roger. Very often, if I'm saying to somebody, "Oh, do you know Roger Q Mason?" They'll say, "Oh, well, maybe when I was." You don't know Roger. Like, don't know Roger. You have not met.
There's an on and an off switch. I mean, you either know me or you don't. Some people try and forget.
Oh, they couldn't, as if it were an option. When you're an icon in your late teens, if you've already made icon status on a campus, that says something.
I mean, I think about those times, and there was no language for the kind of a queerness that I have learned is my own. And you couldn't do anything but be brazenly visible because that was the work of revolution that would set the next generation free. And I knew that from a very early age that I was doing things both in my own personhood and also on stage that would be setting a record of not only survival, but of thriving that other people would be able to use. Because there really was, I was sort of like in a frontier on my own in many ways, and no one knew what the hell was going on. Hold on, my colleague, hey girl, so no one knew what the hell was what I was doing. And I didn't either, but there was just no language then in the early 2000s for trans and gender nonconforming selfhood.
Roger, would you say that that might have influenced or maybe directly be a source for your relationship to history, where you are acknowledging the reality of beings that have had to shape their times, especially in a film like this where the the veil is very thin between both this historical period and the lived reality of now, and you see both so clearly at the same time while being able to peer and say, oh my goodness, the unique challenges here and the unique challenges in modern, as I look at my watch in this moment.
History is alive, palpable, and very real to me. because I'm in some ways I live history, and it's due in great part to the fact that my grandmother and two aunts raised me. They were from Del Valle, Texas, outside of Austin, and I grew up in their house. And so my dinner time conversation was the story of a woman who read books at one of the early HBCUs by the light of a pot-bellied stove.
Wow.
My first, my aunt was born in 1892. And so I was sitting next to history every night. That was my everyday reality. So how can I not reflect the transformative power that comes from sharing that knowledge with other people as a record, not only of survival, but of innovation? We are not unique in our situation. I hate to say, it may be grave, it may be tragic, it may be frustrating, but it has all happened before. And all we have to do is literally look to the elders to understand how they survived it and garner from them the strength and the wisdom to carry on. That's been my mantra. How can I activate history? We
Well, and I
spent,
think
go ahead.
I was going to say, Roger, to jump off that. I mean, I think just being out on the festival circuit for the last few weeks with the film, people always say like, "Oh, well, what made you want to do a history film?" And it's funny because I feel like as much as it's history, it's also very much Roger's memoir. Like, yes, there are these historical figures, but Roger has also placed deep personal contemporary truths alongside them. And I kind of think from that specificity that Roger has accessed comes something that's a very universal statement about loneliness, especially in our day and age for queer people of all communities.
Let me tell you a little secret, Andy, just because it's you, baby. It literally is a memoir. What he's referring to is that a lot of those monologues in the piece that are spoken directly to camera, they're adaptations from the play. And the play borrows them from an autobiographical solo show that I wrote about phone sex that
Ooh.
never happened. And so we farmed out the best of those exposés and we transposed them for the original play. And then we fictionalized them slightly so that it would be this character having those experiences. And then that became Lavender Men.
Yeah, in the first draft of Lavender Men that I read, Taffeta appeared at the start and Taffeta appeared at the end of the play, but otherwise Taffeta was not there. And I said, Roger, the most interesting character is off stage.
Yeah.
Bring him back.
Well, and I really appreciated Taffeta guiding the conversation even as you come in. You come in and you get those aren't my pronouns. You know, you're watching the hardest working person juxtaposed against this very interesting depiction of these various characters that all have their own role, but each of their stories tells a much greater story. I saw that so before Lavender Men ever became the the work that it is today on screen, on our streaming and yours, it was on stage in many cities, in different cities, and then ultimately taking those experiences, and there's a lot of content in it that I love that was like lyrical, and I love the when Fantasia comes, the word Fantasia goes on screen and we're in a ballroom for a moment. There's a lot that's going on. How did you translate what you learned from the stage, but also some of the most meaningful things to film? Because that's a huge challenge.
So I sort of think about it this way, Terrell McCraney had Barry Jenkins and I had Love Holder, you know. I mean, and the comparison is interesting because you had a play that's very lyrical, and then how do you make it fit within the sort of expectations of verisimilitude, real life, and also cinematic fullness. that is at the core of what a movie is. Well, in a way, it sort of helped us answer some of the questions from the play, which is why Taffeta is telling this story. Well, in the play, she just sort of gets up and says, "I'm gonna tell you this story, and don't ask me why, because bitch, that ain't your business." And that's why she's doing it as a means of empowerment. So
Yes.
that's sort of an implied reason why. The movie, is going to want a more direct answer to that. Movie audiences have different tastes and different attention spans and interests. So we had to create some sort of inciting event that would prompt this person to then venture into their imagination to understand how they found themselves in this current plight. And so the genius of this is Lovell creating this play within a play, which was very much his idea of having this frame to propel the story from the contemporary real life, experience of this person whose name we don't get really in their life in the theater. We only learn the name that they tell us, which is Taffeta later. And that's the name that they are identified by. But this is an individual who works at a theater as a stage manager and has a very toxic work environment, one that is riddled with interpersonal minglings and some violence, sexual violence. And the trauma of that experience prompts them to seek refuge and strength in the past in order to decide to leave their job and find a new future. If I can say it to you in a sentence that clearly, then it's that simple to comprehend from the screen. And that's what Lovell was able to contrive, was the sentence that we needed to bring this thing along. And that's why it works. And that's
Well,
why it translates.
well, and I was also going to say too, I mean, thank you for all that, Roger. I mean, we had very everything was also just such a joy to preserve the language because Roger and no one comes up with a premise quite like Roger Q. Mason in terms of this great little triumvirate of Taffeta, Abe, and Elmer. But also, when we had initially started working on the play back in 2019, I remember at one of the early workshops afterward, I said, my favorite thing about this material is that it defies adaptation. It can never be anything but a play. Um, Cut to a pandemic and multiple other things that proved me otherwise. But but one of the things that I think we both realized very quickly was that we had to lean into the theater of it. The more we tried to run away or pull against it, the more it actually defeated what we were trying to do. Like it had to become a movie about theater and this character who is determining their life and their story within this space, but really kind of demanding the question, well, why can't they leave? What does it take to break this cycle of toxicity? Because I think it was kind of the kind of beautiful parallel that why Abe Lincoln? Well, they're literally telling this story in a theater, which is the place where Lincoln died. Like, if Taffeta is going to save their own self, they need to both literally, metaphorically, everything get out of the theater. Um, and so consequently, once we really leaned into that question, I think both in production and in the edit, lots of doors started opening to kind of drive toward the question of how does one tell one's own story when one has been so conditioned to just trying to insert themselves into other people's.
We live in a world of extraction, right? What can we get out of other people? What can we do for them, or what can other people do for us? And how often do we spend the time farming the fertile field of our own spirits? Who do I who do what makes my heart sing? What do I need to do? Who do I need to become? And so the ending of the piece, which is a rally cry for radical self-love, is really the point of the whole thing. You know, you can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it. that's sort of, and Lovell, you may not know this, that's borrowed from Faith Ringgold. There were two books, but one of them was called Tar Beach. And I remember reading Tar Beach as a child. And it's about the transportative power of human ambition and the imagination that
I
you
was
can.
just listening to a podcast that was discussing Tar Beach as it relates to the TV show Felicity.
Mhm.
How funny. Wow.
That's where I got that phrase from. I don't know if you ever knew that, but that's what, because Lovell will tell you, I live a very improvised life, and yet there's great order to it. It,
Yeah.
but it's seemingly completely improvised. Part of my charm, I suspect, is my impromptu ebullience.
Well,
And
well, Roger's like a Seurat painting. If you get up close, it just looks like a lot of diverse dots. But when you step back, the dots all form this
Dot
marvelous,
and I can't
miraculous bit of order.
and I
chaos
can't
is the
remember
brush.
anything. I can't remember a damn thing I say sometimes. It just comes out because I'm so hyper focused on the sincerity of a moment that I'm there. And then when I'm out of it, it's gone. So in that moment, I was sitting there and we were improvised. I think that was improvised, that line. And it came out. And then I said, "Oh, Lovell, you've got to keep it." And I said, "Honey, I'm gonna tell you something. I wanted to end the movie."
Ooh.
Roger is very correct that they are someone of radical presence in the best way. I mean, one of the monologues in the film that we actually added from the play, which is the monologue about the middle school dance when Taffeta and Elmer are dancing, we added that in post because we felt we needed a moment that showcased how Taffeta, the things Taffeta had experienced had sometimes made them cruel to other people. And we kind of
Balance.
Yes. And so we just kind of opened the door to the booth and just kind of turned Roger loose. And Roger basically just recited that whole monologue off the cuff and then kind of poked their head out and was like, "Was that okay?" And Mia Chang, our producer, and Mike, our sound designer, we were all just like, "Yep, it'll work. We're just gonna take out that one little 3 second pause, but otherwise you're good. That was great."
Oh, and I was just telling Lovell a story. I mean, I think Lovell's very good at whispering little motivations in the actor's ear. And then you just submit yourself to the honesty of that moment in response, and then magic comes out. I mean, that's what makes him such a great director
Well,
because
and to interrupt that very quickly, you all had a unique situation where Roger, you're revisiting your own words as a performer. And
Mhm.
sometimes when you write the words, the feeling is, you can write in an environment that is very controlled. Film set is so not controlled. So I would love to hear, I know we're closely approaching time, but I would love to hear the difference between writing something and being the focus, the star performer, and how you navigated that. Because I'm guessing by the time you're performing again, you've written this years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the play started 15 years ago almost.
Wow.
And so it's a very old play in a way, and yet that's true of any project. By the time it gets out, a decade's passed for you. But I really do feel like I'm very good at emotional compartmentalization. And I don't mean suppression of emotion. I mean literally that's the place for that person and that set of tasks. And this is what we're doing here. It's very strange how I'm able to do it, and I don't know. I think part of it has to do that I went to a Congregationalist school from preschool to 12th grade. So and I grew up around, three Edwardian age women. So I think that those two things allowed me to be, a little bit compartmentalized in my relationship. So when I divide up my intention and my energy in that way, I'm one person when I'm writing, and that's a very particular set of intellectual and spiritual and artistic skills. And then when I'm acting, I don't know anything. I'm discovering it for the first time, and I'm learning in the room, in the moment, with the people that are there. And that's just how it goes. I can't tell you why that happens. I've told you perhaps why my lineage has led to it in some way, but how I took that lineage and made it into this practice, I can't necessarily say. It maybe it's a gift or a curse, because in the next moment I'll be like, oh, what are we doing next? Because
I think we all have settled on it being a gift. I was for as compartmentalized as this performance, the getting from writing to performance and all of those pieces are, it was really refreshing to see such an intersectional piece, so thoughtful to see themes that we see in other films. I often see people discussing things like issues with eating and direct conversation around that, where people will limit a film to only about that. But there are so many pieces that are part of the tapestry and texture of Lavender Men. If you haven't if watching this interview hasn't made you want to see it, we can have a personal conversation because I don't know what's going on. We have to wrap for today, but I'm so thankful to be in the room with such gifted presences. Thank you for creating something that's so meaningful and will continue to touch so many people. And I cannot wait to see you all collaborate again.
Oh, thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for taking the
thank
time.
you. Thank you so much, Andy. It's a great pleasure and honor to be speaking with you. And I love this little reunion, and I'll see you again very soon.
You sure will.